So one of the things that stuck out in Dr. Ford's testimony was this thing about the airplanes, where she had apparently told the Republicans in the committee that she couldn't come out for an interview on Monday, to do her testimony on Monday, because she's afraid of flying. And so then it ended up getting delayed till Thursday. All these additional allegations came out, etc. And then under the testimony, she admits she flies all the time, even for recreational reasons, not just for work, for recreation and things of that nature. So that clearly seems like there's not some truth in there. And I thought, oh, she's lying. But the more I think about it, I don't know that she is, because I don't know that she's the one who initially released the statement about being afraid to fly. I think that was her lawyers. And the more I watch this testimony and think about it, I think her lawyers are acting in bad faith towards her and not doing their job, which is taking her interest at heart and being the most important thing. And instead, they're operating for the interest of the Democrats like Dianne Feinstein, and top goal is to stop Kavanaugh from being confirmed, or at least to delay it. That, to me, seems to be their primary interest, which is unbelievably disgusting if true. But let me go through some of the reasons I think this. The first, when I started to think about this, was the Republican prosecutor, or the prosecutor the Republicans brought in, Mitchell. The last thing she said to Dr. Ford in the last 3 or 4 minutes was she started to explain how normally victims or alleged victims of sexual assault, they don't just jump into formats like this, where it's like a big show, big public spectacle, millions of people watching in front of powerful people, and in 5-minute increments. That would never happen. And she's like, can you believe that's not the best setting? And Dr. Ford and her lawyers chuckle about this. Yes, of course, this is not a good setting for something like this to occur. And she goes, Mitchell says, do you know that the best thing is we have professionals that basically sit down and let you talk? And then they'll chime in every once in a while, but that's how you get the story out. That's how her feelings and her story comes about. And she says, yeah, Dr. Ford says, that sounds like that would have been great. Well, the problem is Dr. Ford's lawyers never gave her that chance. Instead of taking her to a professional and allowing this to occur and hashing out all the details and make sure she's remembering properly and make sure she's taken care of best by an actual professional, they ran her off to take a polygraph by a person that they hired, right? Another person, someone that these Democratic lawyers have chosen, right? That's who's going to administer this polygraph. And it was apparently very nerve-wracking. Apparently, it may have occurred on the day of Dr. Ford's grandmother's funeral. Now, does that sound like something that lawyers that care about their client would have them do? Of course not. Lawyers would have taken her emotional interest at heart, wouldn't put her through this pressure-filled situation until she talked to professionals and things of that nature. But instead, they rush her right off to take a polygraph. That just seems unbelievable. Was the polygraph of Bennett, and the polygraph, right? This became a question early on. It's like, no, wait a minute. If Dr. Ford never wanted to come public, why would she take a polygraph? And it does. It makes no sense, right? No one really pushed her on that question, but I think the reason is because she put her trust in these people, this counsel. She went to her congressperson, and then who got in touch with Feinstein, and Feinstein advised her to hire the Katz firm, her lawyer Katz, and that's who she put her trust in. You would put your trust in the lawyer you hired as well. And these lawyers said, no, you got to go. It's important. Take this polygraph. It's an important first step. We need to do this. But it doesn't help her at all. It puts her in a stressful situation that's not the best for her. Who does it help? It helps Feinstein. It helps the Democrats. Because it's almost as if they knew that Dr. Ford's name was going to come out eventually. Dr. Ford never wanted to come public. She didn't want her name to be public. So why would the polygraph be important? It would only be important if you thought that her name and allegations were eventually going to come out. That's why it would be important. So keep that in mind. It helped Feinstein's case. It helped the Democrats' case. It helped the case against delaying for Kavanaugh, but it didn't help Dr. Ford at all. Now, the next thing that I want to look at with this is the letter that Dr. Ford sent, right? She supposedly actually, let's skip on that for a second. Let's talk about the flight things that we were talking about in general. So when Grassley tells Dr. Ford, I don't know if you knew this, but we did offer to send out people to talk to you in private in your own setting that were willing to fly out themselves. And Dr. Ford says, yeah, that would have been great. I would have liked that. It was almost like she didn't know. How could she not have known? We all knew. Everyone who has access to the internet or watches the news knew that the Republicans offered this. But it probably makes sense that Dr. Ford wasn't online, wasn't watching the news. She's probably quite shaken up. Apparently, she was getting death threats. I would probably not want to be online and see what's going on with that either. So she probably was just, consoling herself, not entertaining like what's on the media or anything, or consuming any media. And so she's just listening to her lawyers. And it seems like her lawyers never told her, oh, by the way, they'll fly out here and meet you so you won't have to go there. Dr. Ford seemed to say in the testimony that's what she would have preferred to do. Her lawyer's job in this situation should have been like, what do you want to do? If you don't want to testify, that's fine. If you do want to testify, that's fine. If you want them to fly out here, we can make that happen. We're here for you to help you. But instead, they sent out a statement, and that's why I truly believe it wasn't Dr. Ford that sent out the statement, I can't be there on Monday because I'm afraid of flying. It was her lawyers that said that. They wanted to delay. That's their goal. They didn't want Dr. Ford to know, actually, we can't do this Monday and they'll fly out here. That wouldn't work for them. They needed the delay. And ask yourselves, what happened in that delay between Monday and Thursday? Well, we had like 5 new accusations pop up. Some of them just completely anonymous with no names attached to them. You had the second allegation, Ramirez, that came out that it's admitted was she was found because Democratic operatives were out there looking for people at Yale that thought that Kavanaugh was a drunk or did anything bad. And so they dug her name up, and she still wasn't sure that Kavanaugh was the person who was that offended her until she sat and talked with a Democratic lawyer for 6 days. Did she go talk to a professional like like the prosecutor Mitchell said would have been appropriate? Probably not. Instead, she just talked to this Democratic lawyer. And then after 6 days she admitted before those 6 days, she wasn't sure if it was Kavanaugh or not. That's what she admitted to friends on the phone and former classmates. But after 6 days with this lawyer, now she knows. So that's one of the things that happened. The third accuser of the gang rapes, which is totally farcical, which you could check my other videos out. In a nutshell, apparently Kavanaugh was leading gang rape gangs with dozens of victims and people that seen this, but 6 FBI background investigations never picked it up. The only person that has any knowledge of it says, yeah, I witnessed from day first party I was at, these underage girl, even though she's an adult, underage girl's getting gang raped, but she continued to go back 10 times. At one of these parties, this woman herself was gang raped, but she continued to go back after being gang raped, never told a soul about this. It just doesn't even pass the smell test, right? Well, it turns out that woman once sued her employer. Who was her lawyer? The Katz Group. Isn't that strange that these lawyers that sent out this statement requiring the delay all of a sudden had people that were connected to them, former clients, now releasing accusations in that 3-day interim? Isn't that strange? That interim wasn't good for anyone. It wasn't good for Kavanaugh, for certain. It certainly wasn't good for Dr. Ford, that she would have preferred to have the people fly out to her, and every day she had to wait was another more day of anxiety of her family being attacked and things of that nature. It was only good for Feinstein and the Democrats that want to delay the confirmation of Kavanaugh. And they got more smears out there, which was directed to destroy the confirmation even more or have more delays, right? So then let's talk about the letter. Originally, they asked Dr. Ford in the testimony, why did you write the letter? And she says, well, because she saw that Kavanaugh's name was on the short list. What the short list was Trump came out with a list of judges that he might possibly nominate. So his name was on there. And Dr. Ford says, I saw Kavanaugh's name, and I decided that I wanted the Senate to know my story and these allegations before they voted so they can know what kind of man they were voting on, right? Okay. But how was the Senate going to hear that unless they heard the allegations, right? Like, it's impossible for everyone who's on the Senate to take that into consideration if they never hear it. So what she did was she got in touch with some people, and ultimately she sent a letter to her local congressman, who then got her in touch with Dianne Feinstein, and they discussed how to best go about this. Feinstein sat on that for 6 weeks. In fact, she met with this woman, she met with Dr. Ford, recommended the lawyer, right? This is admitted in testimony. Dr. Ford is the one who recommended Katz, her lawyer, right? Or I'm sorry, Dianne Feinstein's the one who recommended Dr. Ford, the lawyer of Katz. And then, even while that was going on, she never once breathes a word. She continued. Feinstein, by the way, meets with Kavanaugh after that, never breathes a word of these allegations. She meets with the Senate committee, never breathes a word of these allegations. Now, keep in mind, Dr. Ford testified that she wanted the committee to know about the allegations. She just didn't want her name attached to it. She didn't want the letter to go public. She didn't want her name to go public. Feinstein's excuse is, oh, I was just doing her wishes. No, you weren't. I wish the Republicans would have hammered down harder on this with Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford admits she wants the story out there. She never said, oh, Feinstein, here's the letter, but please don't say anything. Because that was the implication. Like, why would Dr. Ford wait until the last week to say anything? And she's like, well, I didn't. I wanted this to come out sooner, right? It was Feinstein that waited. Feinstein says, well, I was just protecting her anonymity. There's processes all the time. She could have went to the committee in the FBI. They would have protected this woman's name. They would have had discussions, interviews, investigations the FBI would have done anonymously. No public information would have been out there about Dr. Ford. This would all have been handled in-house. Kavanaugh's name wouldn't have been smeared. Ford's name wouldn't have been smeared. All of this would have been taken. But instead of having her interest at heart, Feinstein instead held that information and sprung it at the last minute because it benefited her. It didn't benefit Dr. Ford. That's why, another instance. And keep in mind, how did Dr. Ford get this lawyer? Oh, it was recommended by Dianne Feinstein, right? Now, the letter itself was leaked. Only 3 groups had the letter, right? You had Dianne Feinstein and her staff. You had the Democratic congressman that she first went to that had the letter. And then you had her lawyers, Katz Group and her other lawyers. Now, Feinstein says it wasn't our office that leaked the letter. And I actually believe her. The Intercept came out, which is a news publication that got the letter and said, we didn't get it from Feinstein's office. I think they got it from the Katz Group and her lawyers. Her lawyers all throughout this have showed no interest in keeping Dr. Ford's best interest at heart whatsoever. It's been all about how can we help the Democrats? How can we help Feinstein, the person who recommended us? How can we help delay or destroy Kavanaugh's confirmation? Obviously, the best thing that happened to them, the best ammo they had was this letter coming forward, Dr. Ford's name coming out there, the allegations being sprung when they were. The only people that had that letter were Democratic groups. When they grandstand about, look at how terrible these death threats are. This proud woman had to come forward. She's so brave, and she's going through all this hell. Like, they're right. And who's the cause of that? Well, yes, obviously the jerks that are the ones doing death threats and things of that nature. But the people that are responsible for her name being out in public are Democrats. 100% guaranteed. And Feinstein tried to be like, basically say it was Dr. Ford's fault. Oh, she said she told people on the beach and friends, so must have been them that leaked it. Yeah, maybe so, but they didn't have the letter. Only you had the letter and her lawyers and the other Democratic congressman. That was it. That was the only 3 groups that had the letter. So if Dr. Ford didn't leak the letter herself, then it was one of you 3 groups. That means the Democrats intentionally put her in this situation for political reasons. And I think it was her lawyers that did it. I think that it's a shame. My personal feeling is something probably happened to Dr. Ford. I don't think Kavanaugh did it. I see no evidence for it. She seemed quite credible to me. I think Kavanaugh definitely seemed credible. I just think that it seems like her lawyers are intentionally misleading her, intentionally having her do things that are good for them and good for the Democratic Party, but not best for her, are leaking information, holding on to information until the last minute and then leaking it, including her name, because they knew that the biggest impact, the biggest veracity would have this woman out in public. They purposely didn't tell her that she could have had this interview in private at her own home. That would have been sent, the committee would have sent people to interview her. It was all about get her name out there at the last minute, as public as possible, to have her name attached. This woman who's gone through this woman who's having a difficult time, get her out there, sympathetic face on TV. It has to be as public as possible. We want to be able to say how credible she is and have all these horrible allegations be out in the open with her name attached to it, and definitely with Kavanaugh's name. And so I think that there needs to be a serious investigation as to whether ethics violations occurred with her lawyers. And we need to know who released this letter. And we need to know, like, someone needs to sit down, and someone impartial, I'm not saying a Republican, needs to sit down with Dr. Ford and be like, were you happy what did Feinstein say to you when she was setting on these allegations? What were those conversations like? Were you happy that you're watching for 6 weeks and still not a word of this has been breathed? Did Feinstein tell Dr. Ford that actually we are discussing it behind closed doors? What's going on? All these questions need answered. But I'll tell you this, all the Democrats that are grandstanding are totally disgusting. It was them. They released her name. When Cory Booker and all of them are up there saying, oh, she went through all this abuse. Yes, she did. It's on you. And they won't own up to it. They know it was on them. They know it was a Democrat that leaked her name. They know it was them that sat on it for 6 weeks. And still they make excuses instead of just saying, yeah, okay, what happened was terrible and disgusting. It was wrong, but we need to move on from that and try to find the truth. No, they don't say that. Instead, they're only interested in stalling more. They had a chance to ask Kavanaugh questions. They had a chance to ask her questions. But instead, they grandstand almost the whole time. We want an FBI investigation. We want an FBI investigation. Oh, more delays. More dragging it out so Dr. Ford's name could be trashed in public and Kavanaugh's name could be trashed in public and both their families can receive more threats. That's what we want. They don't care about any of the families involved. They don't care about Dr. Ford, who allegedly went through this abuse, at all. If they did, they would have not released her name, not leaked her name, not set on this allegations for 6 weeks, not ensured that she didn't know that they would have sent people out to see her instead of having this public spectacle. They wanted the public spectacle. It's all politics for them, and it's absolutely disgusting. So once more, this should be rejected by everyone. This is proof positive that I think, well, I can't say that. My feeling is that the evidence shows that her lawyers were not acting in her best interest and were instead acting in the interest of Dianne Feinstein and the rest of the Democrats. And that's a shame for this woman and anyone, even if you think that Kavanaugh shouldn't be on the court, and he did what this woman alleges, you should be absolutely appalled at the behavior of her lawyers and of the Democrats that put her through this, leaked her name, sat on the allegations, gave her bad advice, didn't get her the help she needed, didn't tell her that she could have been interviewed in private. You should be appalled by that because that's a terrible thing.